Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class, which is from Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 30. So without further ado, we'll start the class segment. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Ivadadari Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Yashodanandana Vajjana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vajjana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivadadari Yashodanandana Vajjana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Privadikacharya Stotra Satasisi Maharaj Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Privadikacharya Stotra Satasisi Maharaj Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON founder Acharya Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasani Gaura Bhakta Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shami Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mathura Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Sringa Bhagavan ki jai. Nitai Gaur Brahmanande. Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Guru and Gauranga. Gosira Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashaya Udare Srimadi Bhakti Deva Swami Namo Namaste Krishna Prabhupada Sri Guru Karuna Shakti Bhakti Narayana Namaste Cha Narong Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswati Vyasant Tujayam Vijirayat Nasta Praiswa Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatu Tamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So again, good morning, dear devotees. The class then is Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 30 of Bhagavad Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam. Ja Akshini Shakshur Abud Patanga Lakshmani Vishnu Ahani Upecha Tad Bru Brijimba Paramastiti Dishnam Aposhatalu Rasa Eva Jiva Dio Akshini Chakshur Abud Patanga Pakshmani Vishnu Ahani Ubhecha Tadbru Vijimba Paramesti Dishnam Aposhatalu Rasa Eva Jiva Dio Akshini Chakshur Abhut Patanga Lakshmani Vishnu Ahani Ubecha Tadbru Brijimva Paramesti Disnyam Aposhatalu Rasa Eva Jiva. Hare Krishna. Anyone who would like to chant can unmute and do that now.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Dhyayor Akshini Chakshur Adbhut Patanga Lakshmani Vishnur Ahani Ubecha Tadbru Vijrumbha Parameshti Dishnyam Aposya Talu Rasa Eva Jiva. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, so I want to see the Sanskrit, because it's a little bit went up, so I can read the sound.
Is it better?
Dyorakshini chakshurбhut patanga pakshani vishnurahani ubhecha tad bhruvijit jrimbha parameshti dhishna aposya talu rasa eva jiva.
Jai. Thank you very much.
Hare
Hare Krishna. Sorry about the text being so far up.
Yeah,
I could see on my computer, but I'm
because
glad
I
you brought
like
it
to
up.
read the Sanskrit.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Anyone else would like to read? All right, we'll go to the word for word now. Dear, the sphere of outer space, Akshini, the eyeballs, Chakshu, of eyes, senses, Abhud, it so became, Patanga, the sun, Lakshmani, eyelids, Vishnu, of the personality of Godhead, Sri Vishnu, Ahani, day and night, Ubhe, both, Cha, and Tat, his, Guru, eyebrows, Vijimba, movements, Parameshti, the supreme entity, Brahma, Vishnyam, post, Apa, Varuna, the director of water, Asya, his, Talu, palate, Rasa, juice, Eva, certainly, Jiva, the tongue, Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The sphere of outer space constitutes his eye pits, and the eyeball is the sun as the power of seeing. His eyelids are both the day and night, and in the movement of his eyebrows, Brahma and similar supreme personalities reside. His palate is the director of water, Varuna, and the juice or essence of everything is his tongue. Report by Srila Prabhupada. To common sense, the description in this verse appears to be somewhat contradictory because sometimes the sun has been described as the eyeball and sometimes as the outer space sphere. But there is no room for common sense in the injunctions of the Shastras. We must accept the description of the Shastras and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. Common sense is always imperfect, whereas the description in the Shastras is always perfect and complete. If there is any incongruity, it is due to our imperfection and not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching Vedic wisdom. Om Ganati Virandasya, Gana Gana Shalakaya, Chakshu Umilitam Jena, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirveshesha Sunyabari Paschatyadi Shatarini. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Siva Shari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. The translation again, English translation. The sphere of outer space constitutes his eye pits, and the eyeball is the sun as the power of seeing. His eyelids are both the day and night, and in the movement of his eyebrows, Brahma and similar supreme personalities reside. His palate is the director of water, Varuna, and the juice or essence of everything is his tongue. Hare Krishna. First, we have to remember that the Virat Rupa is not necessarily being described for ones who know about the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a personal way. This is for those who are non-devotees, the way we know it, not practicing Bhakti Yoga, those that are being taken slowly by the mercy of the Lord, now being represented by Shukadeva Goswami, to slowly begin to appreciate the Supreme Personality of Godhead beginning from the material universe. And when the material universe is being described as a form, then those who are not connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead yet the way we are connected with, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada as devotees, they will begin to think of the Lord in a form, even though the universes and the demigods are being used in the description. Now, if you look at the description, we're talking about the eyes, the different parts, and we'll get to that the parts that were described earlier also, so that you have a complete picture of the Virat Rupa. So these are being described, and these places are places in our own bodies that we're familiar with. So then the person who is not connected to the Lord in the personal form will begin to now relate to the Lord with the planets and the demigods in a personal way. And that will be the transition that the person would need so that when you get to the situation of now describing Krishna with two hands, then the same things will be described too. The feet, all the way up to his face. But they have had some kind of introduction to that form using the Virat Rupa. So then it will be easier for them to relate across from the Virat Rupa to the personality of Godhead himself. And then from there would, hopefully begin to appreciate Bhakti Yoga. Now, in describing this, the Prabhupada brings a very important point in the purport. And in purport, he says, to common sense, the description in this verse appears to be somewhat contradictory because sometimes the sun has been described as the eyeball and sometimes it's been described as the outer sphere. So, Sri Prabhupada says, there's no room for common sense in the injunctions of a Shastra. Why? Well, common sense refers to us using our sense, our minds. But the minds are connected. The mind we have, each person's mind is connected to the senses. And one of the four defects is that we don't have perfect senses. We have imperfect senses. And so if the imperfect senses are being used to perceive something connected with the mind, then how can we say that we'll be 100% right all the time? It's not possible because we're using something that is imperfect. So because of the imperfection, we can't conceive of anything, even though the mind may be receptive to what the senses are saying to the mind, because the senses themselves are not perfect. Then the mind can't be perfect. Therefore, for material things in our own lives, we may use the mind, but when it comes to the Shastra, we can't use the mind in that way. We have to accept Shastra. A glaring example the Prabhupada gives many times is a child is born, the mother is the one that gave birth to the child. Who is the father? How would we know? Common sense. Common sense will only tell us that the father impregnated the mother. But which father did it? Common sense can't tell us that. It would be told only by the person who is in authority to say it, and that is the mother, because the mother knows who got her pregnant. And she can point to that person. So then common sense just drops off at that point. We can't reason anything out that way. And that's why Papa says common sense is always imperfect. In fact, it's always imperfect because our senses are always imperfect. But the description of a Shastra is always perfect. And one more thing that's important is even if the Shastra gets messed with, for lack of a better word, Krishna says, I will appear. Time and time and again, the demonic person tries to change things. And I will set the Vedas straight the way it is. So the Shastras not allowed, the Krishna would not allow the Shastras to be contaminated. Therefore, the Shastras are believed. As a matter of fact, when Srila Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita, there had been some interpretations by books on Bhagavad Gita before him, some of whom I've actually seen, and some of whom I've seen some people comment from, that not Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And it became clear that they were taking some aspects of Bhagavad Gita and then going off on a limb and then commenting some things material and sometimes metaphysical about it. But the main points, especially that Krishna saying that he is the supreme and nobody is equal to him or above him, that they never describe, even though it is in the Bhagavad Gita. So things are taken by our imperfect senses, and sometimes we fashion something different. Therefore, we should take things as the Shastra tell us. Then there is no ambiguity. So the Virat Rupa was described earlier. The text before this text is text 30. It starts with text 25, the gigantic universal form, the personality of Godhead, It's in the body of the shell of the universe. Mm? And it's covered by the sevenfold material elements. And it says the persons who studied it in that way, they realized that Pataloka constitute the bottom of the feet. We always start with respect to the Lord from the feet, from the bottom part and up to the face. The heels and toes are the Rasatala planets. Ankles are the Mahatala planets. And the shanks are the base on the legs that between the feet and the knees. That area. That constitutes the Talatala planets. Then it goes up to the knees. The knees of the universe is text 27, and we are text 30 today. We're just going through the overview of this. The knees of the universal form are the Sutala, and the two thighs are the Vitala and Atala planetary systems. Then the hips are Mahitala, and the outer space is the depression of his navel. Outer space is mentioned again, right? Because in text 30, outer space is mentioned. The chest, this is 28, the chest of the original personality is the luminary planetary system. Mahat Loka, that is his neck, and then the Jana Loka is his mouth, then his forehead is the top of planetary system, and the topmost planetary system, which is Satyaloka, is the head of he who has 1,000 hertz. So that's how it's described. Again, the Shastra has already said, and this is what helps us out. He says that the Virat Rupa is imaginary. Why? Because the planetary systems are in particular positions, and they are also going about in the vibration. Hang on a second, it looks like somebody's need to find out somebody else who's okay. Right. Okay. So so it's described that way. So if we use our own minds, we're gonna see some places, but how it was mentioned this way and now it's mentioned that way. And so, just Mahitala is the outer space, and then Mahitala is his hips, outer space is the depression of his navel, the depression. Outer space is the depression of his navel. But if you come to number 30, we'll also talk about outer space. This time, referring to the Lord's eye pits. And the eyeball is the sun. In fact, sometimes you see the eyeball, two eyeballs, you see the sun and the moon. Now, again, the Virat Rupa is imaginative, as we said earlier, is to help a person to begin to perceive of a form of the Lord from the material energy. But the Lord is spiritual. Not even material energy is from him, but it's a separated energy. So it is good to have some conception, some idea of it by how the Virat Rupa is being described here. If we start from the bottom part, the Shastra tells us actually a whole lot, even from the bottom part. Bottom part is the hellish planets in Canto 5, text 20, chapter 26. There's quite a bit of description by Shukadeva Goswami. The hellish planets, they are situated between the space, the intermediate space in the three worlds and the Kabadak Ocean. The three worlds, the higher planetary system, the medium planetary system, the lower planetary system, then the hellish planets. Sometimes we even, and I myself have made that mistake before, but after the Earth, the Bhumandala, that's the medium planet. Below that, then we have these lower planetary systems. They are 7 total. But Shukadeva Goswami is describing that where the punishment actually takes place are hellish planets. They're actually called Naraka. Those are the places where the Yamaraj resides. Yamaraj is in Pitruloka. Hmm? He is in a region between the Gavdak Ocean and lower planetary systems, which is exactly where the hellish planetary systems, the hellish planets are. Hmm? So what happens to lower planetary systems then? Well, below it, as we see, the sense gratification decreases as we go further and further and further down. In the higher planets, there's more availability of tremendous sense gratification, material sense gratification. But also, there are still places of suffering because death is still there, and disease is still there. There are places in the Shastra talking about Lord Brahma getting a slight headache and going to sleep. And when Lord Brahma sleeps, then there is, in fact, some partial destruction. And that is, in fact, going to happen and is described in the Shastra that is not the full sleeping time of Lord Brahma at night, not the 4,320,000,000 years that he goes to sleep. This is a short one. And we all know in our own experience when we take a nap, it's not like when we're sleeping at night. The time is shorter, even though the process is still the same. So the Shastra explains these things so that a person can get some appreciation. But for devotees, we'll never lose sight of the fact that Bhakti Yoga is the way to go. The Lord is, in fact, spiritual, not material, even though he owns everything and he's the cause of all causes. But again, in the Shastra, these things are explained so we can have some appreciation, even from the material creation and how it's put together. So, speaking about this, I was talking about what's in Canto 5, and this is chapter 26. So, Yamaraj is the king of the Pitas. He's in Pitriloka, and he's in that place that's below the planetary systems, the 7 lower planetary systems, and the Garbhadak Ocean. And that's where the Yamadutas are, and the sinful people are brought to him. So his jurisdiction is he deals with human beings who are in a mode of ignorance. And he judges them properly according to their specific sinful activities. And the hellish planets are there to be sent, for those people to be sent to, and suitable punishment are given. So some people think that Yamaraj is fictitious, but I won't waste your time talking about him because he has his own abode. He's very much real. Because some people don't believe in hell. You'd be surprised. There are some religions that are quite popular, well known, that don't believe in any hellish planet. Judaism is one of them. So when we talk about it, sometimes it seems like, oh, it's just a thing that we know, but around this particular planet, the Earth, different religions believe different things. That's why Krishna says for a devotee, you come to him, you surrender, and you also abandon the different types of religion. Because I've already given one example that one religion, Jewish religion, they don't believe in hell. But in here, the Shastra is telling us even where they, not only are they there, but where they are too, between the lower planets and the Garbhadak Ocean. They're called the Naraka planets. And that's where the punishment takes place. So, in some authorities, they say the 21 hellish planets, and Sukadeva Goswami lists them. And we'll just, again, to get people to get away from, or be careful about committing sins, we'll just give a couple of examples about what happens in the hellish planets. The words don't like to hear it so much, but anyway, in chapter 26 of Canto 5, which is the chapter getting to the end of the canto, text 8, Sukadeva Goswami is saying to Maharaj Pariksit, my dear king, a person who appropriates another's legitimate wife or children or money, takes it that doesn't belong to them, takes another person's wife, children, or money. At that time of his death or her death, it'll be this, if you say legitimate wife, then it means that a wife taking the husband of somebody else or a husband taking the wife of somebody else. This is also explained that when when the Shastra makes that kind of comparison, it goes both ways. But we read it as it is. A person who appropriates another's legitimate wife, children, or money is arrested at the time of death. And the Jamadutas bind him with a rope of time and forcibly throw him into the hellish planet known as Tamishra. And on that planet, that person gets chastised. He'll be beaten, he'll be rebuked, which means he'll be insulted and beaten, and then no water to drink, no food, so the person will be starved. So that person will go through severe suffering, and sometimes in the chastisement, they will faint, but then the Jamadutas wake up person and the chastisement will continue. There's one more. Destination of a person who cheats another man by deceit, by coming up with statements and cheat that person, and then takes his wife and children through that cheating process. They are taken to the hellish planet called Antadamishra. So then they go through a punishment like a tree which is being chopped at its roots. So the person goes through such extreme miseries. And these afflictions are so severe that he loses a sense of sight, loses intelligence. So we have to be careful. And there are 21 such places for different types of punishment to take place, different based on what the person has done. So the rest of it is described in Canto 5, Chapter 26. You can read it for yourself if you want to. So the main thing Shiv Papa says that we cannot judge the Shastras based on our senses. In one conversation, he was explaining this. This is in June 13th in Detroit, 1976. Some people will say, I believe, or you believe. No, what's your belief? He says, you may believe wrongly. You're not perfect. So every one of the conditioned souls that we have, the life that we're living, we have the imperfect senses. We have mistakes, also cheating. So if you got imperfect senses, then what's the use of your belief? So that was the point Srila Prabhupada was saying. And as he said, that a child may say, oh, I know my mother, I've never seen my father, therefore there's no father. How would you say that? But the child can come to that conclusion because he doesn't see the father at home and only the mother. So some people also say the same thing. The Supreme Father, they don't believe in him. And Prabhupada calls them rascals. I don't believe in God. But God in the Shastra says, I'm the seed-giving Father. Everything comes from me. And everything. That's not only human beings, everything in creation. So if a mother is there, the child is there, then there must be a father. You may not know him, but you can know him through your mother, and she's the authority. Like that. And so there are places where, depending on who is speaking in the Shastra, some things get described, but we got to take it not with our common sense and start questioning. For example, Srimad Bhagavatam and Garga Samhita. They describe pastimes that are same, but then sometimes the details change a little bit. And I remember one time I read, I had finished reading the Garga Samhita, and there was a very nice pastime involving Narada Muni. And Narada Muni was actually, even though he's great and goes around in Veena, in all the worlds, material and spiritual, praising the Supreme Personality of Godhead, helping people, taking disciples, and even teaching some things in the Lord's plans to even to the demons, like Kansa. So, but he goes around playing his Veena. And the part of this by Garga Samhita describes that the long, long pastime that Narada at first was not singing the songs at the right times of the day. And therefore, the personalities of raga, the personalities of music, were being affected, in a subtle way. We went to a particular place, Ilavrita Vasha, and there were these personalities of raga, of music, that had deformed bodies, even though they had beautiful faces, but deformed bodies. And when he asked them why the bodies were like that, he said the son of Brahma that likes to go around sings the wrong songs at the wrong times. Now, they never mentioned him by name, but now they kind of put two and two together, so they must be talking about me. So then he asked, how do you deal with this situation? He says, well, and they told him, in order that we might be fixed properly, you have to go to, or we have to go to Goddess Saraswati, and first, you don't go directly to her. You have to do some austerities first for her to approach you, to come to you. And that's what Narada did. For a long time, I forget exactly what years existed in Gaga Samhita, but forgive me, my mind does not remember the length of time. But Goddess Saraswati was very satisfied, and she appeared to him. And when they talked, Narada said, I would like to be the best musician and also sing the right tunes at the right time. So there were so many musical arrangements that Goddess Saraswati taught Narada. And at that time, she gave Narada her Veena. And so there's a nice pastime. Narada actually began to give this knowledge that he had gotten, perform with the knowledge that he had gotten from Goddess Saraswati, first to the demigods, but again, we went through that very quickly. We went to different lokas, Brahma Loka, we went to the spiritual world. We went to the sun gods, the sun, the sun god was busy going around with his chariot, making sure the sun was working properly. He went to Brahmaloka. He went even to Vishnuloka. He went to the spiritual world, the Vaikuntha planets, but Vishnu had actually left to go attend to a matter involving his devotee. Therefore, he went to the spiritual world, and he finally got permission from the gopis there to see Lord Krishna, and he performed along with another heavenly planet person called forget the name. My mind's not working so well today. So the two of them performed, but Narada was the main show, performed for Radha and Krishna, and Krishna really appreciated very much. So he was playing the veena at the time of performing. Now, if you hear this and you know a little bit about something about Srimad Bhagavatam involving Narada and Veena, Srimad Bhagavatam will tell you that Krishna gave the Veena to Narada. But Gaga Samhita says Goddess Saraswati gave her Veena to Narada. So what is the resolution for those? Well, Narada doesn't have to have one Veena. It's not difficult to figure that out. Some people have 3 or 4 cars. So why could Narada have only one Veena? So, but you make a case out of this. Sometimes, anyway, this is part of common sense to use, though, but common sense is not always right. But in the Shastra, it's like that. Sometimes things that may be a little bit different. The case of Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha was killed by the Lord as Varaha. And part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that in the white form of Varaha, he lifted up the earth from the bottom of the Gavadak Ocean. And in the red form, he fought and killed Hiranyaksha. So are there two? Are they two Lord Varahas? Well, I don't have to say anything about that. Just read what the purport, what the Shastra says about that. So this is an interesting lecture. So in Bhagavatam 8, Canto 8, Chapter 5, Text 6, Srila Prabhupada brings it up the purport about this. So the bodyguards Jai and Vijay were born from Diti and Kashyapa Muni. They became Daityas because Diti, sons of Diti is called Daityas. They were cursed by the 4 Kumaras. So Jai is the one that took the form as Hiranyaksha. He fought Varahadev, So that is mentioned in regard to the Revata millennium. The Revata is a Manu. There are 14 Manus in the day of Lord Brahma. Now, the entire thing began in Swayambhuva Manu's time. Revata Manu is the fifth Manu. Swayambhuva Manu is the first Manu. So what really happened? So according to some authorities, there are two Varahas, which I've already explained, even down to the colors of them. According to one, Varaha appeared during the regime of Swayambhuva Manu, and they said one. So some saying one, some saying two. And those who say one, the argument is that Swayambhuva Manu, Varaha stayed in the Gavadak water until the fifth Manu, the Revat Manu. So it doesn't really matter which one is right. If we use our imperfect mind with the imperfect senses, we're going to be in trouble trying to figure it out. The first time I remember, it's like yesterday, at Gitanagri, before the temple was built in 2001, thereabouts. Bhakti Maharaj was actually giving the class. And I remember his face, he smiled and says, "But there is a white Praha, and then there's a red Praha, and apparently there was one white Praha in the Swayambhuva Manu's time, and then there's another one in a different Manu's time, which is now being said here. The main point is about how the pastime finally unfolded. The point we're making here, and what Srila Prabhupada also made in the text that we're discussing today, is we cannot use these minds connected with these imperfect senses to try to figure things out. What we're supposed to do as devotees, that never changes. Bhakti Yoga is described exactly to the T how it's supposed to do. It only comes to a point sometimes where we have some things that aren't as important as the need for a devotee to be connected to Bhakti Yoga. And sometimes there are some differences or in description. That may happen. If you meet that should never throw you off. It is part of the Shastra, and you have to understand that we are using this imperfect mind to think linearly, and our linear thinking is not always right. Our linear thinking is not always right. And that's the important point that we want to make here. Even when the Virat Rupa was described, it was described as a part of the system of the higher systems, the higher planetary systems, being the Lord's part of his face, the neck, and so on. And I read that earlier. Just to remind you again, the neck is the Mahaplanet. The mouth is the Janaluka. Forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The mouth is the Jana system. Now remember that. And now the topmost planetary system, which is Brahmaloka, Satyaloka, same thing. That's the head of he who has 1,000 heads. Now you can start thinking immediately, wait a minute. The mouth is the Jana's planet. The forehead is the Tapas planet. But aren't those things part of the head? So how does the Satyaloka become the head when the mouth is Jana's and the forehead is the Tapas system? Again, you think linearly, you're going to see that it doesn't seem to fit in our mind so much. So basically, the point is we not to use mind based on our linear way of looking at things. Because if you look at it that way, then it seems like the Maha planets and the Jana planets are inside the Satya. And that's not true. But then the fact is, the head, which is Satyaloka, does contain a forehead and it does contain a mouth. That's what I experienced it. So again, this is a very interesting lecture, but the point is, don't try to figure things out with this mind, which is connected to the imperfect senses. Take things, as Srila Prabhupada said, the final way of understanding is taking it as the Shastra says. But more important, the chanting of Hare Krishna And what Lord Chaitanya did, that never was different. We were showed how to get out of the material world and go to the spiritual world. And again, the universal form, the Virat Rupa, is actually imaginative, and it is to put the person who does not relate to the Lord in a personal form in a situation where they're going to begin to relate to him in parts of the body that we know about, so that they begin to see the Lord in some personal imagination in their head with these planets. Mm-hmm. And then from there, all right, so the Lord has the planets are showing the form. Actually, he is spiritual. When you bring it to the spiritual form, then we can actually talk about the Supreme Personality of Godhead up to the main form, the two-handed form. And this is why, last point, is why Arjuna asked the Lord in the Battle of Kurukshetra before it started to reveal his universal form. And from the universal form, and they retained his universal form, where Arjuna was also given the proof of what Krishna had said earlier, that everybody here will be killed except you, except you. So in that form, so Arjuna saw people being devoured by the mouth of the universal form. In this one that's been described, the different planets and their positions are described here. And Arjuna, from there, he said, it's quite fearful. Please show me your 400 form and then your original form. And so the Lord showed the 400 form to satisfy all of those who are looking at the Lord, and that includes those who are in the heavenly planets also, worshiping Lord Vishnu, the 400 form, Narayan, 400 form. And then the original form, two-handed, Krishna. So we are fortunate to be worshiping Krishna through the agency of a spiritual master, the two-handed form of Krishna. And better yet, we are in a planet where the human beings are also two-handed. So it's not too difficult to put two and two together. For us, it's not difficult at all, even with the imperfect senses that we have, to perceive the Lord in his two-handed form. And then by the Lord's own mercy, he appears in the Acha Vigraha, Radha Krishna, two-handed form, Radha, two-handed form, Krishna. So then it makes it easy for us to put two and two together, even though this mind we're using is connected with imperfect senses. So we worship Radha Krishna, but we worship Radha Krishna, and Sri Prabhupada says, very, very important point that he makes. And I was going to end, but I think I'll throw that one in there also. It's very important. And that is that our worship, our consciousness should be to the deity in awe and reverence. Although we're looking at Radha Krishna, we have to worship the deities Radha Krishna in the mindset of Lakshmi Narayan, because we ourselves aren't developed to the point where we can relate on a personal level, like those in the spiritual world, in Golok especially, relate to Radha and Krishna. But they have come by their mercy here in the Achavigha form, the deity form. So we do not, the rules are there because Radha Krishna, when they're there, then Lakshmi Narayan is also there, because their expansions are Lakshmi and Narayan. From Radha, Lakshmi, and from Krishna, Narayan. But we are not that advanced, therefore we worship Lord. Even looking at Radha Krishna deities, we worship in awe and reverence, like Lakshmi and Narayan. And if we don't do that, so Prabhupada says in his purpose, we are actually doing the wrong thing. This is in the letter to Madhusudan in 1969. He made mention of that. So again, finally, just get the idea that the universal form is to help those who don't relate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead on a personal level. They're not back to yogis that we are being trained for. And so when some things are not adding up in our minds, We are the ones that sometimes look at things that way, but it is not necessarily at the higher level described in the Shastra that way. So we take what the Shastra says, and the Shastra will lead us to the right source, finally getting out of this material world and going back home. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. So I hope this lecture made a little sense to you guys. But this is the time to unmute yourself. If you want to make some comments, you can. And I had another pastime to talk about, but we don't have much time now. It's almost 9 o'clock. So please unmute yourself, make some comments if you want to, or ask questions as you like. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions? Any comments?
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances.
I accept my
All goes to Prabhupada. As you were speaking about the technicalities, a little bit of it in this lecture, I was very happy to hear the conclusion that, we don't have to get so much into the technicalities. It's good to know the technicalities, it's good to know the details, but I think sometimes when we get so caught up, in the technicalities that we forget the higher purpose of the message and the underlying, goal of life, the purpose of life, that, how can we really see the Lord's, magnanimity, his greatness, like one point that you mentioned about this Veena by Narada Muni. Yes, some of us have more than one cars. So if we are just a local, commoner material body that can have more than one car, the Lord can give as much as he wants, Narada Muni can have more than one Veena. So yeah, that's a very good point. I think we get so caught up in the pastime that we forget the Lord can do anything, anywhere, any amount, anytime. It's just how do we really, what's the word, appreciate the Lord's magnanimous quality, his quality, his character, whatever you want to call that, the greatness of the Lord, that he is beyond any of us and he can do anything and everything and whatever he wants. And how can we see that and really take to the process and to surrender ourselves to such a great God, and how we can, and interestingly, this chapter is entitled the first step to God realization. So these, I feel these intricacies, this technicalities, this depth of knowledge is there not only, to make us get so academically into it, but to really see that this is how we can realize God of his greatness. Yeah, so that's what's coming to my mind. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So yes, very, very important point that you made. Sri Prabhupada many times talked about the fact that we have tiny brains. So much so he says teeny brains. I guess it's making the point of very, very tiny brains. And that's that we are tiny. And therefore our brains can be that big. And if we try to reason things out from the Shastra that doesn't fit our minds, then we're trying to talk about what's in the ocean when we're living in a well. We have to understand that it's actually the the lack of being able to expand consciousness is actually a problem with us, not that things are they don't fit the way we think and therefore we think there's something wrong with it. That's why Sri Prabhupada is warning that we should be careful and go with the Shastra as we know it, as we read it. So there is thanks for the point that you made. Devya Prabhu is saying Hare Krishna. This is in the chat. Hare Krishna, precept and humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. As we hear these description of that form, that is the Virat Rupa, and go through our days, it's good to just is it good to just use those descriptions to remember him? Well, in one sense, yes, and in another sense, no. yes, those planets, the yes part is this, those planets do exist. The form are just to let somebody who is not a devotee begin to appreciate the form of the Lord through these planetary systems that are material. Hmm. That's as far as we go. But to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead for a devotee, we have to remember the two-handed form, not the Virat Rupa form. Hmm. Some of these ideas here and what the Shastra talks about are to help us so that when we are in a situation where we have somebody who does not understand the spiritual, but is very much connected with the material, even up to the universal, the universe, and they begin to describe things based on the Virat Rupa, then at least you know more about it so that you don't get into an argument with them, but understand that that's the level that they are at. Mm-hmm. And if they are ready to hear, then you can tell them that, all right, so what you've described is the planets of the universe, and they're described to the Lord's different parts. So the Lord has different parts, just like we humans have different parts. Therefore, the Lord is, in fact, we take after him. We take after him. So his original form then is with the face, with the neck, with the navel, with knees, with shanks, with feet, and even the undertone, about all of that. That person can agree. So this is a way in which we start, and in the teaching, in education, when you take a course in education, they tell you that you take the student that wants to learn from what they know to what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So if they appreciate this form, then that's what they know. And you use a connection that this form describes parts of the body. Therefore, the Lord have parts of the body indicates a personal form. And then you go away from the material now to the spiritual. In the spiritual, the Lord is like this, his abode is like this. And then you go and you can even still connect some things. Yeah, the sun is there, but the sun is a reflection of the effulgence of the Lord. Now you're really describing the Lord in his real form. Even from the effulgence, and then from the effulgence, and then to the Paramatma, and then the Supreme Personality of God in the two-handed form. Mm-hmm. This is how some people appreciate it. They start at that level, but they go from the material. Then you can take them from the material, the Virat Rupa, to the form, which is based on the effulgence of the Lord, the Brahmajyoti. But at that point, you're talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sun is there. The sun is a reflection of the effulgence of the Lord. The effulgence in the form of the Lord, and you say, yes, the Lord has effulgence from his form. And the Virat Rupa already described the form. But now in the spiritual, it's like this, and you go on unto the highest, which is relating to the Lord in his personal two-handed form. Mm-hmm. So that's how we can help, not to just remember, but to also help those who may not know about the spiritual form, which is actually the most important. We've got the most important information from Srila Prabhupada. But some people may still look at things in the material level. And so you start from the Virat Rupa up to the spiritual, if they're ready to delve into the spiritual aspect. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the question. Any other questions or realizations? If not, then thank you very, very much. But was an interesting class. I just kept praying to my spiritual master to help me to present this, because we're going to defeat our imperfect senses and our imperfect mind in this particular lecture, and at the same time talk about us as devotees and how we relate to Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not something for me to handle, but through the mercy of the Lord, take it for what it is. Panchakalpatarubhasya kripa sindhve evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much for coming on today. Hare Krishna. Have a nice weekend. We're already on Friday. Krishna conscious weekend. Hare Krishna.